According to a recent report by the US news syndicate, the Venezuelan regime is allegedly using Iranian-made Unarmed Aerial Vehicles, also known as UAV. The report says that these UAVs are essentially thousands of unmanned systems which are essentially designed to gather intelligence and also to strike surface or air targets. The report by the US news syndicate also points out that ultimately the Iranians have marked out Venezuela as a potential base for some sort of activity against the United States in the future. Getting to this point, it is quite important to take into consideration the fact that the Venezuelan and the Iranian regime has been two of the main allies in the connection between Latin America and the Middle East. Venezuela, since the rise of former dictator Hugo Chavez, and Iran, since the rise of former leader Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, they have made a pretty significant diplomatic action in the way of aligning the interest of Venezuela, Caracas, and of course Iran, Tehran. This is something quite remarkable because we need to remember that the relationship between Venezuela and many Middle Eastern countries before the rise of the Chavismo in Venezuela was mainly with the Middle Eastern governments that were part of the OPEC. So this relationship is essentially made to support each other in the different diplomatic and economic actions that the US have been taking against both regimes, both in economic terms with different sanctions and of course politically in the way of sanctioning prominent members of both regimes. Or actually, in the case of Iran, we saw how the previous administration of former President Donald J. Trump actually killed Soleimani, which was one of the main leaders not only of the Iranian Revolutionary Armed Forces but also of Hezbollah. So it is an undeniable fact that it's quite dangerous to have Venezuela with these weapons if we take into consideration that this country is actually near the US. Of course, this is not warmongering whatsoever, and of course it is an undeniable fact that it is probably quite premature to make any type of conclusion, but the fact to have these types of regimes that violates human rights almost every single second, the fact that we're talking about the only government in the history of Latin America to be investigated because of crimes against humanity, this type of regime having these types of weapons, it is a fact that is quite dangerous. It's quite dangerous not only in the internal matter, not only for the Venezuelan population, but also for many other countries around Latin America, especially Colombia. If we take into consideration the different tensions that have been taking place between both countries, the fact that the Venezuelan regime now have these Iranian-made UAVs is something quite delicate, is something quite dangerous, especially if we remember that Colombia has always been the main ally of Washington in this region. So we're going to see what is going to happen, but the only thing for sure is that these weapons makes the Venezuelan regime more dangerous than many people think. Reporting from Medellin, Colombia, Luis Orozco, Newsweek.